Yeah, it's chilly, but we're back at it, back in the garage today with reassembly day. Hopefully, we're gonna start putting this thing back together. Got the head back from the engine shop. Nothing wrong with it. It was totally flat. Nothing that required any kind of planing or leveling or anything. So, $10 to check it out, and it's back. So. I'm going to work on getting this thing back together today. Don't know how far I'm going to get. I do have to do a little bit more cleaning to get ready to mate the head and the block together. So I'm going to work on that and see how it goes, see how far I get, but it's pretty exciting. So here we go. Reassembly, just like taking it apart, but backwards. How hard can it be? It is cold in here, but it's warming up nicely thanks to the Garage Fire 3000. I finally dug this thing out and hooked it up to a tank, and I should have thought of that a little while ago. That's a pretty nice feature to have in the garage. Feeling warmer already. And here she is, back from the shop, looking good. No issues. The valves are pretty clean, so. We're going to go ahead and work on getting it back together, but step one, I'm going to get back under here and finish cleaning up the surface of the block and get ready for that. So the other thing I'm going to do before I get too far is I'm going to go ahead and pull the oil filter out right there. This thing had a pretty recent oil change, but we know now that we've contaminated all that oil with coolant. So I've got everything in order to do a couple of oil changes, but I'm going to go ahead and pull that filter out, just dump it out. Make sure there's no milkshake stuff in there. There shouldn't be, because the car has not been run since we dumped coolant down the cylinders. However, it did have a bad head gasket. So in any case, we're going to pull the filter off, just dump it out, make sure it's not too awful, put it back on, and if all goes well, when we fire this thing back up, I'm just going to run it for a couple of minutes, shut it off, and then do a full oil change and just try and clear any of the debris and stuff that's left over in there, or any of the nasty oil from when the head gasket was bad. So I'm going to start by cleaning the surface and taking that filter off. Okay, we have got the surface of the block all cleaned up. I did a light clean on the top of the pistons, nothing too aggressive, just kind of made sure there was nothing loose, wiped them off, gave them a really good clean out with the vacuum, and wiped it out with a white paper towel and all that, and there's nothing in there that's loose or nasty. So I went ahead and laid the head gasket on top of the block surface. And there it is. And next is we're going to set the head right on top of there. Okay, back on there. All right, now I want to do some reading and just make sure I'm 100% sure I understand the process for putting the bolts back in to the head. I did get new head bolts. I've done a bunch of reading on how torquing things down works and why we do it. And I do know that there's patterns in the Haynes manual where we will run these down, starting from the center and working out, because we're trying to work any looseness out of the fit out from the center to the edges. So put everything in kind of hand tight, and then we'll start working through the torquing process to flatten this head out and seal it down against the new gasket. So we read up on that and start torquing. All right, so Murphy's Law has struck again. Always. Got my new head bolts out, the kit that I ordered. Something looked wrong. For the 3 bolts that are on the outside timing belt end of the head, there's 2 long ones and 1 short one. And what you know, this kit came with the opposite. 2 short ones and 1 long one. So my only options at this point would be to stop and figure something else out and order another set of head bolts or whatever. Or I feel okay about reusing one of these head bolts. I hope that's the right thing to do. I'm going to use it in the middle position of these 3 since I feel like that is the safest place to put that one. It's surrounded by other bolts that are holding plenty of torque. So every other one is going to be brand new. So I'm going to reuse that one. It's in excellent shape. There's nothing wrong with it. It's exactly the same as the new one. It's just been stretched out once before. So I'm going to put it right there. But right now what I'm going to do is go around, I'm going to finger tighten all the bolts down just kind of by hand, and then we'll start working on the torque sequence. All right, I'm redouble, triple checking all of my stuff. Here's the sequence from the Haynes manual. So as you can see, we start in the center and then work our way out in a spiral. And then we do these 3 that aren't seen here on the outside edge. And bring them up to the first spec. It's 3 stages. And then we do an extra 90 on the certain ones, and then we do another 90 on certain ones. So I'm going to set the camera up. I'm going to really slowly work my way through it. One of the things that I've read that's really interesting is that, well, A, when you put the head bolts in, don't drop them in. And the other thing that I have highlighted here is that we want to try and pull these torque specs in one pull. We don't want to like ratchet up to them. So here we go. I'm going to set up and see how this goes. All right, so here we go. The center, the main 10, go in this spiral up to 22 foot-pounds. It's also in the Haynes manual under Newton meters, and this wrench has both, so I'm able to just double check because some of the settings are in between the notches that I have, so I'm within a half a pound of the right setting for 22. So here we go. I'm going to give one little pull just to kind of make sure that they're seated in there, and then I'm going to pull back and I'm going to go until I get a click. So just make sure that was nice and in there. And here we go. We're going to try and pull these up to 22. There it is. I broke out my new smaller torque wrench to get down to, for these side ones, it's 11 foot-pounds for the first pull. And my other big one doesn't go down that low. So these 2 are 11. So we're gonna get those now. Okay. All right, now all of our center main bolts get a 90-degree turn. So we're going to start with 1. All right. And pull them 90 degrees. So should be straight to the front of the motor. Okay, next up is I went ahead and got my timing chain cassette assembled by comparing it to the old one. I held on to the old one, was able to kind of match up how it goes. So I soaked my chain in oil overnight. Is it recommended anywhere? Not really, but I couldn't see any harm in doing it. I read one guy did it, so I did it. Can't hurt, just help get some oil in those rollers. And I'm gonna go ahead now and drop this down in place, hopefully. Okay, here we can see the end of our new timing chain now hanging down in place. And the next step before I do anything else is I'm going to pull that old seal out, crank seal, and put a new one in. And then just prise out with a little screwdriver and just carefully not to gouge anything up. And then we should be able to just tap the new one right back in. Okay, new seal is in. It was a little bit more of a chore than I thought it was, but I did eventually get it out, and then you just kind of press it back in, and I seated it home with just a block of wood so that it sits nice and flush to the surface. And then I just ran my finger through some clean motor oil and wiped the inside diameter of the seal, just because it's going to have contact with stuff. So that's in, and now I can start working on putting the bolts back in that hold the timing chain in place. So I'm going to lower the engine down a little bit, and I've got came with the timing chain kit, new bolts that hold those in place. So I'm going to put those in, raise the engine back up, put the upper one in. All right, the cassette is in place, and now I'm going to start working on getting my cam sprockets back on. They're just sitting on there for right now. We just want to make sure that we've got, one says EX, one says IN. So IN is your intake on the back, EX is your exhaust on the front. So we're going to set these on here. Actually, I need to wrap the chain around them first. So let's take the chain. My understanding is that these are not keyed in any way, so they can go on anywhere on the cam here. Okay. Timing chain sitting in place. Now, we find the bolts for that and find the torque specs for that, and we'll get those attached. All right, so I've got the sprockets and the crank pulley on and just snug, but not tight yet. There's torque specs for those, but I'm going to wait to do those until I do a couple other things, according to my notes. Next thing is going to be this new tensioner. Came with the timing chain kit. It's a spring-loaded tensioner that rides in the back of the head and holds tension to the chain. So we're going to go ahead and put that in, and then I think I can start working on torquing all of this stuff down, if I remember right. Kind of cool to see as we thread the tensioner in. You can see how it works. It pushes against the cassette, and that adds tension to the timing chain. And I am going to run this all the way in because the spring is what actually does the job. It's not like we adjust it with this bolt. We just run it all the way in and tighten it down. Okay, next on my list is my upper chain guide. In there. All right, so all of the cam sprockets and the main crank pulley have been torqued down to specs. That is nerve-wracking for sure, especially when you're getting up into that last one on the crank. But I think we're good. So now theoretically, I should be able to pull these cam lock tools off, and everything should stay right where it was put. And if that works, I might try and turn the motor over by hand a couple times just to make sure that I don't hear anything going kabang, running into each other. Shouldn't, but let's find out before we put this whole thing back together. So I'm going to take the cam lock tool off and we'll just see if we can turn this thing by hand and see what happens. I'll take the flywheel pulley pin out and all that stuff. So let's try it. Sorry. There they are. Everything is nice and tight and where it's supposed to be, so I think we did it. I think we did it right. Nice job. All right, I got a ratchet on the crank pulley. Watch the magic happen. Turning nice and easy, and I don't feel anything impeding or banging into anything. I'm going to do 2 full turns around. That's 1. And that's 2, and everything is right back up to centered up. So I think that stayed in time. That's exciting. All right. Well, now that the kind of big gears and chains and stuff are put back together, it's just a matter of disassembly, but backwards. So I'm going to probably keep this brief until I run into problems. But right now I'm going to start on the putting the intake manifold back on, and I'll just kind of shoot little clips here and there as it goes back together, unless I hit something interesting. So, all right, gonna have to call it a day for today. Good progress though. I've got the intake and exhaust manifolds back in place and tightened down. I've got my fuel rail put back on and my injectors put back in. My vacuum pump is back on. I've got all of my motor mounts over here are back in place. I still have one underneath. If I had a couple more hours, I could knock this out today, but I got to wrap it up there. Come back to it as soon as I get a chance, hopefully tomorrow. And I think we'll be able to put this thing back together and get some oil in it and see what happens. So see you next time. Okay, it's the next day. I'm back at it. I've been putting stuff back on, going back up my list, and I am now to the valve cover, and I am going to replace the valve cover gasket along with the little seals that go around the spark plug tubes here. So I took the new one and spent a few minutes just trying to figure out the orientation. So I think I've got it now, so I'm going to pull the old one out with a little pick and try and replace the new one. All right, valve cover is back on with the new gaskets. There is a torque sequence and torque spec for the valve cover. It worked out to 7 foot-pounds. It's listed in inch-pounds in the book, but it converts to 7 foot-pounds. And you do them in a particular order, starting with the 2 in the center and going around the outside. But those are on. The exhaust is hooked back up. I got my heat shields and everything are all back on. So next is I'm going to work on getting the breather tube on, and I think I'm going to put the coil packs and stuff back in, and we're getting close. And that is the engine back together. I'm all the way back through my checklist. I've double checked my dummy checklist. I walked all around it and looked under it and over it and everywhere else, and everything I can find I unplugged is plugged back in. So Here's where I'm at. I'm going to just push the subframe back in and throw a couple bolts in that. I'm not going to put the whole front of the car back together just in case, you know. But I'm going to just bolt that subframe in so that it's not wobbling all over the place. And then I'm going to fill it with distilled water, the coolant system, because I do want to get a pretty good flush on that. So I'm just going to put distilled water in it. I'm going to fill it up with oil. And then we're going to try and start it and see what happens. I'm probably going to, if everything goes well, I'm going to start it, let it run for a minute or so, shut it off. I'm going to drain that oil completely out of it and fill it back up with good oil and a new filter. And then we're going to bleed the coolant system and so on and so on. So anyway, we're going to put the subframe back together, get some fluids in it, and see how it goes. Well, as far as I can tell, this car is back together and ready to start. I've drained the old oil. There was quite a bit of coolant in it from my coolant explosion incident, but let it drain for quite a while. I got all that out, just put 4.5 quarts of fresh, cheap but fresh oil in it. It's filled up with distilled water right now because I do want to flush that out maybe a couple times if everything goes well and put the proper coolant in it. But battery's hooked back up, fluids are in it. We're going to start it. I'm going to go get my son, have him fire it up while I stand out here and watch for fires and leaks. So there we go. I'm going to go get him and we'll see what happens when we hit the key on this thing. No, check that it's in neutral. Just grab the shifter and make sure it moves side to side.
Alright, you ready?
Yeah, foot on the clutch. Okay.
Alright, I'm gonna start it.
Go ahead and push the button.
What button? Oh wait.
Start button. Go ahead and fire it up. Well, it's a good news, bad news kind of situation. The good news is, starts, runs great, just like it did when I shut it off. Started a little rough, but I let it run for about 10 minutes, shut it off, been bleeding the coolant. While it's running, I'm going to go ahead and drain all the fluids again. I'm going to drain the water out, put the proper antifreeze in, a good synthetic oil in it that I like to use on it. Bad news is, it's the same car it was when I took it apart. Hear the fan? The fan kicks on the minute you start the car. And it's throwing a T0128 coolant temperature operating too low. So something is whack in this thing's ability to read its coolant temperature, but it's had 2 new thermostat housings on it since this problem started. So calling it a win, and then I managed to take this thing apart and put it back together, and it didn't make it any worse. It's got a new timing chain and all new seals and all kinds of stuff. But the saga is far from over because I still have the same problem we spent 2 months tracking down before, and I was assured, oh, is it bad head gasket? So it's not even had bad head gasket. There's something going on with this car. This car's got a history between this problem that we can't solve and the fact that somebody put some sort of stop leak in it once before to try to keep it from leaking coolant or whatever it's doing. There's something up with this car. So I don't know. I'm going to do some more research when we get on the forums and see what I can find out. But that's the sound of disappointment right there. That damn fan just runs from the moment you start it up for about 10 minutes after you shut it off. It doesn't matter how long you have it running, what the temperature is. It's 7 degrees in the garage right now. If I try and restart it while it's running through this fan cycle, it runs really rough when you start it up. If I let this fan quit on its own and fire it up, it starts fine. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery to me. I'm going to do some more research and we'll figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, you know, if we're grading ourselves on the initial project, which is to replace the head gasket and timing chain, it looks like we did it. So that's good, I guess. I'm going to do some more research on this P0128 code to see if I can figure out what else it could be. But I'm lost right now. So, there it goes just in time. So, all right, I'll let you know what I find out. Well, this is very exciting. Listen to her purring right now. Figured out what was going on. I just needed to clear the codes, and my little cheap OBD scanner was able to do it. I just had to get it just right. I had to actually figure out how to do that. The other thing I found out was idling rough. My oil cap wasn't on quite right. So that's a pressurized system. Took the oil cap off, put it back on. The idle straightened right out on it. So been running about 10 minutes or so right now. No check engine lights. Fan's running, but it should be right now because it's just running still. But it didn't come on as soon as I started it. We'll see. We'll get it a couple starts to make sure it doesn't throw the code again. But as of right now, it's kind of feeling like a win. All right. A couple days later, I'm out in the garage. I got the car idling. I spent a little time this morning bleeding the coolant system just to make sure we didn't have any air trapped in there. And it's idling like a champ. Temperature on the coolant's getting up to where it's supposed to be. No check engine lights this morning, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think we're going to go ahead and call that a victory. So victory, we did it. About 6 weeks in weekends and afternoons here and there when I could do it. So it was quite a lengthy project, and I spent a lot of that time just doing research before I got into it. But the end result is, yeah, you can absolutely do this kind of project yourself. Lots of prep time, lots of organization, being very methodical. Having a handy friend to call is always a great idea. But I found that there's so much information online that you're very rarely alone on this. I want to give a quick shout out to the Mod Mini channel on YouTube. I followed his tutorial on head gasket essentially to the letter, and that's what got us here. Also, Project Mini channel, great resource over there. He does everything to his own car. Very helpful guy. The North American Motoring Forum is everything Mini. Anything you ever want to know about any Mini, you can find on there. Very helpful people. And my buddy Steve, thanks Steve for helping me out, being on the phone with me as I got a little freaked out here and there. But in the end, there it sits, running right along, ready to drive. So new head gasket, new timing chain, new oil filter housing gasket, new front main seal, new valve cover gasket, new spark plug seals. I don't know, pretty happy with all of that. So thanks so much for watching this. I hope if you're in the middle of a project like this, there's something in here that's helpful to you. If nothing else, it was helpful for me to document this just so I had something to watch to remind myself of what I've gone through to fix this car. But very enjoyable. I feel like a better person for having done this myself. And got to say, budget-wise, maybe under $1,000 for sure. And about half of that was tools, which I now get to keep and use for my next project. But $500, and the estimate, as a reminder, was $5,000 to $6,000 to do the same job. So I got my car back, and I also learned something. So that was kind of the whole idea. So thanks for watching Jim Learns How. Jim learns how to do a head gasket, and hopefully we'll see you again. Thanks.